Welcome to the Pinocchio Project. I'm your host, Mitch Friedman, and can you believe it? We are beginning Season 4 of the Pinocchio Project. Way back in April of last year, we launched this project, which our mission is to examine everyday ideas that promise human flourishing. And ladies and gentlemen, these everyday ideas are coming at you not just every day, but almost every minute, depending on how often you check your social media feeds, the conversations you have around the water cooler, in the neighborhood, at the soccer field, at the grocery store, with your family and your friends. And also ideas are constantly coming at us from the interior as we imagine what the good life should contain, what makes up the good life. And so we at the Pinocchio Project, we want to run these everyday ideas through a biblical grid to determine whether or not they can deliver on their promises. And we've spent quite a bit of time over the first 3 seasons reinforcing and refreshing a biblical worldview. And a biblical worldview is one that uses God's grand story, that is the 4-movement narrative we call the Bible. Creation is the first movement that answers the question, what does it mean to be human? Important worldview question, the most important. The second movement is the fall, which is the problem with everything. That's the second worldview question. What's wrong with the world? The fall answers that question. The third movement in God's grand story is the redemption movement. What can be done to fix what's wrong? And then finally, the restoration movement, which answers the question, where is all this going and what's my part in it? Does this story that I'm in, this world, this life, this existence, does it have a telos or a maturity point? We've spent a lot of time developing that framework and reinforcing it through our conversations, and we'll continue to do so because we believe living out a biblical worldview is the actual path to human flourishing, because it was given to us by the one who created us to flourish. And so he should know he is the designer, the architect of all things, and the owner of all things, including me. And I would propose you. So today I want to talk about an idea or set of ideas that promise human flourishing that have lived as a cultural or societal phenomenon for several decades, but is actually rooted in ideas that go way beyond the past several decades. And that is called living as DINKs. D-I-N-K. And I've talked about this before with some nuance, some specificity, recent headlines and observations on this phenomenon that's now become part of our lifestyle. A phenomenon is something that blows up and everybody sees that it's unusual, it's dynamic, it's fresh, it's new, it's interesting. Well, now this phenomenon that started probably, I would say, late 60s, early 70s, the 1900s, is now not a phenomenon, but part of our lifestyle in Western culture. And it's called to dink. That means I form a family by getting together with another person and deciding to cohabitate, not necessarily to marry, but we each have a sustainable personal income based on a good job. And so we each have an income that makes us double income, and that's the first half of the acronym DINK. DI is double income, and then the NK is no kids. So this lifestyle that's now embedded in Western society is known as double income, no kids. And so what I want to do today is we launched Season 4. In Episode 1, I want to title this episode, DINKing Ourselves into Oblivion. Dinking ourselves into oblivion. And that's fairly strong language, a mighty bold talk, you might say. But I think you'll see, if you look beyond just the lifestyle itself and its quote-unquote promises of flourishing, that there are some very long-term consequences that are actually anti-flourishing to the point of oblivion. And the old saying that comes to mind when I think about dinking is that we can't see the forest for the trees. Now, that's an old expression that actually came into existence, as far as I can tell, in the 1500s. a man named John Hayward. I see these things and I have to research them to find out what the headwaters is, where they came from. And so this expression, you can't see the forest for the trees, means in common language that you're so focused on what's right in front of you and the moment and the now that you can't see the bigger picture. You can't see holistically in the long term what this sort of thing in front of you composes or comprises in a bigger picture. So you literally can't see the big picture because you're focused on a subset or a slice of the thing right in front of you. So DINKing, I would say, is being unable to see the forest for the trees. And let me explain just through a few little sound bites in media over the last little bit, not too long ago. For example, in January of 2023, Time magazine had a little piece titled, what are the advantages of the dinks or of DINKing? What are the advantages of living as double income, no kids? Time magazine, January of 2023. And so here are the trees. What's right in front? These are the advantages of living as dinks. One, you can use your discretionary income to save or invest. And by living off one income, the couple has been able to, for example, save for their wedding, which indicates that these dinks probably are cohabitating. They may have a wedding in the future, they may not. To build their retirement and future savings accounts, and to work towards funding future rental properties. So, in a sense, this double income that we have for ourselves based on our individual incomes, we use collectively to live for ourselves and to save for wedding, build retirement savings, and to work towards investing to build more wealth. So this is what I would call the trees. It's the right now. It's the what's good for me right in front of me. This is from Time Magazine, January 2023. So those are a few pros of double income, no kids living. SoFi, which is a financial company that specializes in many refinancing options for people with overburdened student debt. That's another Pinocchio Project episode, or maybe a couple of them. But SoFi is a large financial house in our country, and they listed in July of 2021, so just a couple of years ago, they listed the disadvantages of DINKing. And this, again, is focused on trees and not forest. One of the disadvantages is that the double income partners have the potential for overspending and splurging on travel and luxuries rather than on saving and investing. Another possible disadvantage, a con, if you will, is that DINK couples may be in a higher income bracket and have to pay more taxes. And then the third one they offer is something that's got a little longer view, but it's still focused on what's right in front of me and my own desires for how I want to live. The third disadvantage listed here in this SoFi article is that there may be less family support for the dinks and their caregiving as they age. So since they've had NK, no kids, there are no Ks, kids, to now provide for them as they move into the age of being less able to provide for themselves and less able to take care of themselves. So I would say that these are the trees. This is what's right in front and has absolutely nothing in view that is the bigger, broader picture. This is what I would call the self-focused and future-blind trees of this lifestyle that's now embedded in your neighborhood. And as I was talking about this episode with a few colleagues, every one of them knew someone either directly involved with DINKing from their family or close circle of network, or someone just outside their close circle of network that was engaged in this lifestyle. So this is the trees. So if we're going to examine these ideas from a biblical framework to determine whether or not they can promote and perpetuate human flourishing, we have to look at the forest. And the forest is given to us through a variety of mediums and people who are absolutely just observing current trends in sociology. And one of them has to do with population. So let's look at the forest. So if the tree is the thing right in front, the forest is now what we see as the bigger picture. And so from the New York Times, we see that America is getting older. This is a headline. This is a headline in the New York Times from just a few days ago. This is June 22nd of this year. The census data shows that the average age of Americans is now 38 and a half years old. That's up 8 years from just a couple of decades ago. So the average age of Americans now is 38.5 years old, up from 30 years old just a couple of decades ago. And so the brilliant social observers on the New York Times staff says that basically the answer is lower birth rates. Tree, double income, no kids. Forest, lower birth rate, aging population, fewer kids. So fewer kids in my own personal desires equals fewer kids multiplied by all the dinks who want personal desires met. And the forest is a shrinking population, which I would call is the step toward oblivion. We've talked about this many times. The Times quotes Andrew A. Beveridge, president of Social Explorer, a demographic data firm. I have no idea of his political affiliations. Andrew A. Beveridge, president of Social Explorer, says, quote, "It's simple arithmetic. Fewer kids are being born." Yes, that is so true. Fewer kids are being born. So if you look at the combination of what the focus of this episode is, the double income, no kids lifestyle, where there are fewer kids being born into the environment that could provide innovation, initiative, energy, labor in the workforce, societal glue and structure in a younger community. It's not just that people are having fewer kids, it's the reasons that they're having fewer kids. So if you decide that you're going to be a dink and you practice birth control so that you will be a dink, but then you get pregnant, then you see the necessary next steps so you can remain a dink and keep the tree of self-focus in view. You choose things like abortion. And while we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the Dobbs decision, there's still much work to be done in promoting the value of life in the womb. And abortion is still a very front and center primary detriment to our flourishing. And that's the understatement of maybe our lifetimes. So the tree is, I want to live for myself. The forest is, if I do, I am now robbing the future by not having any kids in my future, but I'm also now providing a disadvantage to the overall culture at large because the entire workforce shrinks, the economy shrinks, and I become now less able to fulfill a mandate that is at its root biblically centered to be effective and produce not just children, but to create culture as generations succeed generations. the generations that succeed, the generations go smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's not just numerical shrinkage, it's actually the infusion of initiative through education, again, through people who are gifted in providing remedies to problems, social problems, health problems, economic problems, engineering problems. So this is the forest that is created by viewing only the trees. And what's really interesting here, and I'm going to spend a few minutes, the New York Times, as you may or may not know, prides itself on being America's, I would say, most elite, educated in readership newspaper. I call it a newspaper. It's actually read more digitally than people holding up and flipping through the pages from days past. But the New York Times prides itself being the news source for the educated elite. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get some worldview observations from the comments. And there's 502 comments on this article. So I'm going to read a few, and what we're going to do is we're going to examine the worldview as a little practice for us. I promise you that I'm trying to equip you to examine ideas for yourself. So what I want to do here is I want to have a look at the comments on this article and get their the readership's understanding of the forest and the trees. And I think you'll find this interesting. At least I hope you will. For those of you who are watching the Pinocchio Project, I am putting on my reading glasses, or I won't be able to see. I'll see neither the forest nor the trees. So the first response we see to this article: the risk of pregnancy complications. This is her. She identifies herself as a 38-year-old millennial female, so she's right in the demographic. The average age, remember the median, not the average, the median age. I don't know if I said that well in my earlier exposition of the article. The median age is 38.5, and she's a 38-year-old millennial female. And this is her response: the risk of pregnancy complications in a country that doesn't allow me to have autonomy over my own body is too great of a burden to bear. Now, wrapped up in that statement is probably 6 or 7, I would say mostly contradictory propositions. The risk of pregnancy complications in a country that doesn't allow me to have autonomy over my own body. That is right there the kernel of her argument, that she feels, and I'm offering that because Roe, I can't get inside her brain, but because Roe was overturned in Dobbs, that is a risk to her autonomy. So we see automatically a worldview of I being the center of all authority over my own life, which is a violation and anti-flourishing when it comes to image bearers who now have been made by God to be under his authority and his law. So autonomy means autonomos. It's a compound word, a law unto myself. Image bearers flourish best when they're under God's authority. So she says too great of a burden to bear, which means to me that she's not willing to have children. I don't know if she's married or not, or cohabitating, but she's indicating that this huge move in her estimation of Dobbs being overturned, and again, I'm just supposing, but it's pretty common if you look through current comments to these conversations, that since she can't have autonomy, she won't have children, which is contradictory, because in stating she won't have children, she's claiming autonomy. And actually, even if she lived in a state where there were trigger laws, that when Dobbs overturned Roe, these trigger laws against abortion at some level or every level were put into place. California and other states are saying, hey, y'all come on in if you need an abortion. We'll facilitate that. Let's celebrate your autonomy. So that was the first one. Let me scroll down. And what you see all these are worldview commitments. So this first worldview commitment is one of necessity of bodily autonomy. And what's wrong with the world So what does it mean to be human? It means I have autonomy in all things. What's wrong with the world is anyone who, and anything, and any institution, any policy that wants to take my autonomy. Here's one that has to do with economic circumstances as the reason, and global warming and overpopulation. This is from Tim, and the 07-08 collapse, that's the economic collapse, if you remember, the subprime disaster and everything that followed, introduced an era of instability that hasn't been seen since the Great Depression. However, no post-World War period followed the latter event, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but I did want to get to this. And instead, we've been beset by ever-increasing evidence that global warming caused by overpopulation will eventually make our planet inhospitable. Is it any wonder that birth rates have fallen? So there's all kind of worldview commitments and confusion in here as well. Overpopulation, as we've described, is an absolute myth. It's rooted in a book called, originally, The Population Bomb, which frightened many people into this lie. Here's an example. I don't know if I'm just going to read this for fun. This is from Jennifer in Tucson, Arizona, regarding this article about the aging of America now at 38.5 over the past couple of decades was 30, and now it's 38.5. And this is her response in the form of a question. What was the ratio to CEO to average worker pay in 1980? So this is a statement I would assume is of economic comparison that indicates that the average worker doesn't make enough to pay for having children. So too little resources. I'm just surmising. I just try to read these things. I'm going to read one more because they're worldview commitment. And I encourage you to read these papers, and I encourage you to read these comments. It gives you a really good idea of the worldview commitments. Most of them are confusing. Actually, I'm going to read a couple more. This is from Sarah in Brooklyn. If the U.S. wants to increase its birth rate, there's hope here. The only way to do it is to follow liberal policies like those of Norway, Sweden, and Finland. You should examine those on your own, Pinocchio consumers, project consumers. Yes, there's a template. And then she follows with, they don't work there, but that doesn't matter. They're still the only option. So, proven unworkable policy strategy is now the only option. So that sounds a bit despairing. All right, now I'm just going to do one more. Here we go, right here. This is from Richard in Montana. Oh, I wonder if he lives along the Gallatin. Interesting mix of comments. Richard, I agree with you. People who recognize that the world is grossly overpopulated and something needs to be done about it already recognized the answer. So here's Richard's worldview proposition. The world is grossly overpopulated. There we go again. And here's his next worldview commitment. People who blame baby boomers for financial problems arising because they never bothered to calculate whether or not they could afford children is another problem. So the people who blame baby boomers for financial problems. So it's really interesting when you read these comments. These are supposedly the most educated, the best equipped with ideas and philosophical understandings of what makes life work. They are very confused, and it's hard to filter through this. I still try to. In a world with, here's Richard's final statement, in a world with 8 billion people going on 10 billion, having children is no longer the default value. So he's saying it's obvious to everyone that there are too many kids. And so therefore, we are not going to have any children. We've already shifted from a biblical worldview, which he wouldn't recognize, of having as many kids as possible, to actually recognizing that no children is the best way to go. There's all kind of things here. There's actually a suggestion that people that are aging because healthcare is improving, they need to go ahead and get out of the way. They need to remove themselves from the picture. They need to choose end of life with assisted suicide, all kind of things right here. I could read these all day. Here's one. Rita. I already said I was going to finish. I'm in 26 minutes in, so this will be the last one. This is Rita's worldview statement of her mixed commitments. Don't be fooled, Rita says, she's from Utah, into thinking that the earth and our country need billions more people to, quote, fix social and economic problems that will come with a graying population. Sure, Rita says, maybe one generation of older folks won't have the support they need from the young people, but then, after that generation passes, everyone will have more of everything. So we need to get the undescribed, as far as age brackets, older folks out of the way so they won't be a drain of support, and the younger people can use that support for themselves. She goes on, quote, I'm gonna repeat it. Sure, maybe one generation of older folks won't have the support they need from young people, but then, after that generation passes, everyone will have more of everything. True prosperity will come from not having to fight over resources or every last inch of habitable earth. Fewer people is the answer to almost every problem the earth faces. And I say, Rita, that is an absolutely contradictory worldview to human flourishing for generations to come. So again, what we see, and as I close this episode of the Pinocchio Project, the first of season 4, episode 1, season 4, is that the beginning can't see the forest for the trees. We've seen developed in a variety of propositions that come from folks who have a self-focused, future-blind worldview. And for us as Christians, we need to recognize that the purpose of our lives is to live well in the time and space that we've been given. That's Acts 17. These geographic bounds in this period of years with a view toward the future, not just our own future in the kingdom of God for eternity, but also to ensure flourishing potential in the generations to follow. We make sacrifices now for the benefit of a flourishing environment as we leave and enter into the vivid life that's promised to us. And every one of these comments is blind to anything beyond my experience in the current moment for my own satisfying life now. And whatever needs to happen to ensure that that is my experience, then that's the way we go. Can't see the forest for the trees. For the Pinocchio Project, this is Mitch Friedman, about to sign off. What I've forgotten to do in many episodes is to ask you if you're helped by this podcast, if consuming it helps equip you to examine everyday ideas that promise flourishing, then please like, subscribe, refer to friends, leave a comment. Always interested in feedback, especially constructive feedback. Always eager to improve the product for your benefit. So, Season 4, Episode 1, Mitch Friedman, signing off.